There is something primal, almost sacred, about sitting around a fire at night, sharing stories. Why do we tell them? Perhaps it's a way to face our fears in a controlled environment, to feel the rush of adrenaline without real danger. Or maybe it's a way to bond with others, to create a shared experience that will be remembered long after the embers have turned to ash. Click on the link to read Campfire Stories written by the members of our author gang. Enjoy!
Today I'm going to be reading the first in our series of Campfire Stories from our author gang, and we are a group of authors writing stories for your entertainment. Today I'll be reading a campfire story by Erica M. Sabo, and this one is entitled When a Camping Trip Goes Wrong. Paul, a successful lawyer in his mid-30s, planned a weekend kayaking trip with his best friend, Steve and Jack. He wanted a chance for old buddies to reconnect in nature because he hated the underlying tensions between them. And lately, small arguments erupted into heated debates, hidden resentments came to light, and once solid friendships now felt fragile and uncertain. But things didn't go as expected. The weather was comfortably warm and sunny when they left the city, but unexpectedly turned. By the time they arrived at the campsite in the mountains, the heavy rain had turned the calm river into a muddy, raging force. They were soaked to the bones when finally the tents were up, but the flood threatened to wash the tents away because they pitched them too close to the water's edge. And it wasn't just the weather that had turned against them. The stress of the long journey to the mountains and the unexpected storm exposed underlying tensions within the group. Small arguments erupted into heated debates. Hidden resentments came to light. And once solid friendships now felt fragile and uncertain. The team huddled inside a flimsy tent while the rain hammered down and the wind howled outside. They were tired and anxious, listening to the frightening sounds of nature's wrath, debating whether they should tough it out or pack up their cars and return to the city. However, as the sun set and the storm subsided, they regrouped around a crackling fire. The tension from earlier still lingered, but they were determined to salvage their trip and make the most of the remaining weekend together. They prepared dinner in silence, and to lift the mood, Paul proposed telling stories, as they always did on high school trips. Stomachs full and warmed by the cozy fire, the group eagerly anticipated the stories, as each friend took turns sharing tales of ghosts, demons, and urban legends. As their voices lowered to a whisper, and they leaned in closer, it was clear that they were all drawn into the spell of storytelling. The flickering shadows cast by the trees, the haunting calls of creatures in the distance, and the cold night air only added to the chilling atmosphere. As the evening went on, the tales became darker and more twisted, each one trying to top the last, but no one minded. In fact, they reveled in it. They shivered with excitement as Steve, the best storyteller among them, started his frightening story of an old mountain legend. Long ago, a group of hunters had been savagely murdered by a mysterious shapeshifter. Ever since spring, campers and hunters had been mauled by this creature, who was said to be living in the mountains for centuries. Legend says the shapeshifter showed up in different forms, drawn by the campfire, and takes an item from everyone. Late at night, when people are settled and were asleep in their tents, the shapeshifter drank their blood and tore them to pieces one by one. There were never any survivors. The fire crackled and popped, casting eerie shadows on the faces of the listeners. Their imagination triggered, and imagine being trapped in nature with a mysterious ancient monster lurking in the shadows. Paul spoke up, trying to break through the tension that hung in the air. Come on, Steve. You just made it up. There's no such thing as a shapeshifter. Suddenly, they all jumped at the sound of rustling bushes nearby. Steve let out a nervous laugh and got up from his seat by the fire. Relax, guys. I'll go check it out. He walked toward where he thought he heard the noise coming from. Well, everyone else hold their breath, unsure if they would follow or just stay put. After what felt like an eternity, Steve returned with a cheerful grin on his face. Cool it, guys, he laughed. It was just a raccoon. A wave of relief washed over them all, and they laughed at their own paranoia. But deep down, the thought of the shapeshifter lurking in the shadows still lingered. You just made that legend up, didn't you? Grumbled Paul. Yeah, I thought it was when I first heard it, Steve shouted. Until last summer when I saw on the news that 2 hunters were killed not far from here by wild animals. They said they were attacked by mountain lions. But when I thought about this legend I heard when I was a kid... Yeah, I saw that on the news too, Jack exclaimed, shivering. The group's fear intensified as they heard rustling sounds coming from the woods, and a creeping sense of being watched overcame them. Every conversation and movement were now tinged with paranoia and suspicion. And then they heard it. Slow footsteps approaching their campsite. The friends were frozen in terror, certain that their worst nightmares were about to come true. But instead of scattering in panic, their shared fear united them. Bravely, they stood their ground and confronted whatever or whoever lurked beyond the safety of their circle of light. Paul's voice trembled as he shouted in the darkness, "Who's there? Show yourself!" A calm yet authoritative voice responded from within the dense bushes, followed by a bright beam of light piercing through the blackness. "Calm down, young man," the deep masculine voice said. "I'm a park ranger conducting routine checks on campers and warning kayakers not to venture onto the river. The heavy rain has raised the water level to dangerous heights, and the current is too strong for safe navigation." After the ranger disappeared in the thick bushes, continuing his rounds, the friends tried to brush off their fears and continue with their stories. But the unease remained as an added layer, and their anxiety was palpable. The temperature dropped, and Paul shivered and went into his tent to grab his warmer jacket. "Did you guys see my jacket?" he shouted. "Nope," Steve said, standing up. "But I better get mine too. It's getting chilly." Opening his tent, he stood frozen. "That's odd," he murmured. "My jacket is not here either." Jack rushed to his tent and looked inside. "Who's doing this?" he yelled. "My blanket is missing." The group exchanged uneasy glances. As much as they wanted to brush it off as just another one of Steve's scary stories, there were too many coincidences for comfort. The missing items, the ranger's visit. A thought crossed Paul's mind. What if the ranger is the shapeshifter and... The others were quick to dismiss this idea, but a seed of doubt had been planted. None of them could sleep now, fear keeping them awake and alert. They kept the fire going all night, jumping at every rustle in the bushes. As soon as the sun appeared on the horizon, they let out a collective sigh of relief. "Let's get out of here," Paul suggested. "We can't go kayaking anyway." The others just nodded in agreement and packed up their things in silence. They felt relief. They jumped into their cars and drove on the muddy dirt road toward the highway as fast as they could. I hope you enjoyed this campfire story and be looking to others that will be coming from our author gang.